What's up everyone, John the Morgal here, checking in for a new video for you. Hope you do enjoy it. So, who are they? In practically every conversation or dissertation in the truth community, the ever anonymous and equally ubiquitous they come into the limelight. You know, they, referring to a hidden hand of some secretive and dark cartel, an insidious brotherhood which manipulates the levers of power in this world for their perpetual personal gain at the expense of all of us uninitiated. They, the ever insidious and inconspicuous they. Who are they and how many of them are there? Where do they live and what do they look like? Are they all evil, or is some portion of their ranks ultimately benevolent? In this video, we'll attempt to address some of these questions and unceremoniously abandon others, and address the timeless mystery in terms of exactly who are they. Some might point you to Fritz Springmeier's 13 Bloodlines of the Illuminati for a start, while others might point you towards The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin. Both of these are probably excellent places to start, for one thing is certain: they are, in a word, complex. Certainly spanning the ranks of the halls of Freemasonry, dovetailing with a bizarre, secretive, and ritualistic cabal who appear to hold sway over all institutions of power, wealth, and influence in this world. Since all such institutions are run in a similar pyramid or corporate fashion, where a chief executive officer or president or general or HNIC are given absolute sway over subordinates within the corporation or within the unit. The people comprising the majority of, say, NASA, are compartmentalized and ultimately pigeonholed in their specific tasks and responsibilities. Most of the people working directly for NASA, or even those subcontracting for NASA projects, are simply not privy to the big picture of the group. This is why we're not saying your Uncle Ronnie, who designed toilets for the ISS, is in on the fakery. I'm certain that your Uncle Ronnie indeed designed the toilets, and I'm sure he's a great guy. But he isn't making any executive decisions at NASA either. Your Uncle Ronnie was tricked about this stuff since he was a toddler too, just like me and you and everyone else in the modern world. While I cannot possibly provide a definitive, singular answer to this mystery of who they are, I can attempt to shed light on the topic from my personal point of view, whatever that's worth. While the average person considers myself and others like me to be an uneducated, gullible, unintelligent conspiracy theorist, the truth is quite the contrary, at least when it comes to your average flat earther. Sure, there are indeed some flat earthers who are a bit on the kooky side, but the same can be said about practically any cross-section of the American populace. Let's face it, we can't expect to raise our kids by Teletubbies and Rambo, hoping that they will all grow up with their faculties in a prime state. For the record, I honestly can't blame the average person for judging flat earth proponents so harshly, at least at first. I too was entranced by the fake space paradigm and all that goes with it for the majority of my life, and I understand how unbelievable and ridiculous the thought of flat earth is for everyone. Such reactions are actually installed into every American who was indoctrinated in the educational system. It is literally part of the curriculum to make fun of flat earthers and how stupid people were back then when they believed the earth was flat. Children are trained like monkeys to scoff at flat earth proponents dating back several generations. So this has been going on quite a while. It's nothing new to scoff at flat earthers as part of the general curriculum in school. So the big question is, again, who are they? The ones who pick presidents, write the history books, and deceive the entire world that they live stuck to the side of a spinning ball in space. Surely we're not dealing with a single person, or even a single group of people, as much of the manipulation we've uncovered spans many generations, crosses borders with impunity, and actually guard religious doctrines. Most people are pressed to describe their personal 5 or 10-year plan. So who exactly is responsible for certain cultural narratives which unfold over the course of 50 or 100 years? Who wound up with 95% of the value of every US dollar in existence since about 1913 with the creation of the Federal Reserve? Who goes to war in the Middle East to seize control of the world's oil reserves and opium trade? When you think about these sorts of questions, it is interesting to uncover certain connections, or at least ponder on potential connections there might be between the booming prison industry, which profits from imprisoning our people for, say, drug offenses, and the official criminals in charge of the U.S. policy in the Middle East, specifically pertaining to cornering of the opium trade. The government knows full well what prohibition does for any high-demand commodity. When the U.S. government officially made alcohol illegal during the 20th century, early 20th century, we saw the meteoric rise in mob wealth and violence and influence as the mafia is interested in the stuff that's, well, illegal. The U.S. government well knows this, and it could be argued that prohibition was just another purposeful catalyst in the Hegelian dialectic to ultimately provide the necessary public support and outcry, in fact, for dumping gobs of money into the FBI and other alphabet organizations in order to combat the rising mob presence, which is a direct result of the policies of prohibition created by the very federal government. Of course, the rising mob presence was a direct result of U.S. policy of prohibiting the legal sale and consumption of alcohol overnight in a society full of people who really love their booze. The only conclusion really one can logically draw, in fact, is that prohibition was a purposeful move to first bolster the mob and thus, in response, bolster the necessary money it costs to combat the mob. Even the predictive programming element is there in Hollywood. I mean, how many mobster movies were made during and after that time period of prohibition? It was a time of great volatility in the criminal underworld of the great cities of America. Fortunes were made and lost, both on the sides of the mafia and also on the side of the federal government, who justified dumping ever-increasing funds towards their antithesis element of the dialectic. And of course, the big losers are going to be the American people, who are ultimately footing the bill for all of this nonsense, all created on purpose by the federal government. Problem, reaction, solution. The Hegelian dialectic, practically the only trick in their book. Problem. Prohibit the sale and consumption of alcohol overnight in a society that really loves their booze, and use Hollywood to romanticize the fortunes being made by crime bosses in the criminal underworld and ultimately the trade of alcohol. Reaction. Since law-abiding citizens can no longer legally obtain and sell alcohol, the criminals of the world will naturally fill this niche and begin smuggling and selling alcohol for huge markups, creating an extremely lucrative and volatile culture in the criminal underworld. Crime naturally spills over into the streets of Joe Normie, and so it becomes necessary to fight the bloated mob bosses who have their fingers in many pies, but specifically in the booze trade of the entire country. And finally, solution. The mobs take over legitimate levers of power like the unions and invest their massive fortunes won by the illegal trade of alcohol during Prohibition in lots of other lucrative, legitimate industries as well as not so legit industries. The feds dump huge amounts of money into their pre-planned response to the problem that they created in the first place with their policy of prohibition of alcohol. If we look at the 20th century as a whole, in terms of the expansion of American military-industrial complex, spending on defense by the U.S. was allegedly around $50 billion back in 1960, according to macrotrends.net. The same states that in 2019, defense spending in the U.S. was around $730 billion, more than 10 times the amount of dollars since we saw back in the 1960s, although we need to keep in mind the hidden theft of our money's value, inflation, of course. What most people don't realize and claim to not care about is that money that evaporates out of our very pockets and bank accounts due to inflation, that value doesn't just disappear into the ether. It goes into the pockets of the people who control the money supply, specifically the Federal Reserve, which is, incidentally, not federal, nor does it hold anything of value in reserve, so its name is quite literally a double lie. For the last 100 years, everyone who saved or spent US dollars was participating in the literal theft of their own money. Nobody physically heisted the bank and carried duffel bags of money out of any vault. Instead, the very intrinsic value of their money evaporated over time by a deliberate, hidden tax on our money called inflation. People think that inflation is just some natural state of our currency, but the fact is, inflation is the symptom of a monetary system that is sick and is operating with one purpose: to siphon money from everyone into the pockets of just a handful of people. People don't notice the evaporation of their money because it happens very slowly over time. But the simple truth is, our monetary system is, for all intents and purposes, a big scam. And you and me, well, we're the suckers. Everyone who saves dollars is participating in this theft, and we are all the victims of this theft. Those same people who have a vested interest in the masses unwittingly participating in the very theft of their own money are responsible for overseeing our money supply, and therefore have the politicians in their pockets. A private conglomerate of banks which attempted to beguile the people, naming their insidious scheme federal. This actually worked for a long time, and to a large extent, it really still does. When you realize the Federal Reserve is not federal, nor does it hold any reserves, and operates a scam to charge a fee to loan out money that it doesn't even have to begin with at interest. Could you imagine having that sort of power and ability? It's like a superpower to loan out infinitely money that you do not have and charge the borrower interest on top of that. If you or me tried something like that, it would be criminal. They'd put you under the jail if you just went out willy-nilly loaning out money that you didn't have and charging interest. It becomes clear that this group, which is at best the Federal Reserve, a failure to fulfill its original charter, and at worst is a deliberate enemy to the American people, not to mention any other country which operates under a central bank that is affiliated with the World Bank. And of course, the World Bank is the worldwide face of the Fed, of course. By the way, I did read and upload the entire Creature from Jekyll Island audiobook on this channel. I'll try to remember to put a card right here, but you can find the playlist of the Creature from Jekyll Island in its entirety right here on the Morgyle channel. So, the Fed was chartered to prevent inflation. They have overseen a situation where the US dollar is worth less than a nickel compared to the original face value prior to the Federal Reserve taking over. That wealth, 95% of all the wealth gained during the gold rush, 2 world wars, the advent of cinema, and all the other advances in industry over 100 years, has practically vanished entirely. But while most everyone incrementally lost their rear ends, there were a few very big winners, of course. This very group of people who profit from the slow boil of everyone else's wealth have a vested interest in keeping people oblivious to their operation, of course. You don't do that sort of thing out in the open, after all. They also have a vested interest in scarcity, perceived or actual. What better offense than one psychologically created by the group you wish to have fenced? You don't have to build a physical wall. They just convinced everyone they live on a ball, so that if you keep heading south, you'll wind up eventually coming right back up the other side of the ball where you started, and it really is quite brilliant. What's more, let's assume, just for argument's sake, that there is in fact more land out there, which has yet to be documented and won't be found on any globe or Mercator projection, or azimuthal equidistant projection for that matter, but it is at least within the realm of possibility, if not high probability. Remember how important scarcity is to any capitalist system, and a possible motive for perpetuating the globe lie begins to grow flesh. As the curriculum prescribed to children being raised in the federal school system stems from the very same source as these other arms, they are, by their very nature, in lockstep with the narrative laid out by the money men, this hidden cartel. They, them. This is why I believe we have the global lie to begin with, or at least one of the big reasons. I believe there is a great deal more land, possibly infinitely more land, beyond our known realm. There are many who believe there is a dome in the sky which has a physical base or foundation somewhere outside our known realm. This may be the case, although I don't necessarily agree, if for no other reason than it defeats this primary motive to perpetuate this grand deception. Again, they want people cordoned off in a controllable area like cattle. They invented the globe in order to psychologically defeat the purpose for exploration beyond the so-called South Pole. I'll remind the viewer that the magnetic field that is used for, well, navigation on this world, but the magnetic field created by a disk magnet, for example, can be found in any speaker, is such where the North Pole is at the center of the magnet, and the South Pole is every point along the outside edge of the magnet. There is no such thing as a ball magnet similar to the one you see with the ball Earth. If there is some crystalline structure high above the world constituting ultimately a dome, it doesn't necessarily need to have a base on the ground somewhere. It could be that very light gases like hydrogen and helium coalesce and crystallize at super high altitudes, super low temperatures, and super low pressure environments. Perhaps precipitation of such condensation of lighter than air gases explains things like meteor showers or maybe even comets. While this is a bit of speculation, it is interesting to think about, but at the end of the day, it is they who are hiding this stuff from us by insidiously brainwashing us into the most absurd belief systems in order to keep us both physically and mentally shackled. I pray that the Most High allows this revelation to be as obvious to you as it is to me. Could you imagine the possibilities for the future if the true frontier were to be explored and documented? What if stories like those told in the Iron Republic were true? By the way, here's a card, if I remember to put it up there, a card for the Iron Republic, which is another audiobook that I put up on the channel a while back. Check that out. It's very interesting stuff. Now, while we may not have exactly answered the question as to who they are, hopefully we have done at least a decent job of fleshing out their edges. Perhaps they will never be exposed perfectly per se, but maybe, just maybe, if enough people wake up to this grand delusion and illusion, we can have a chance to get things back on track, so to speak. The current system we have in place is simply ridiculous and unsustainable and just absurd. I mean, the same entities described in this video are, in fact, responsible for the world's addiction to so-called fossil fuels, as well as our educational system. While people dream about so-called alternative energy sources and quitting the national addiction to oil, the diesel engine was created back in the 1800s and was designed to run on peanut oil. No need for fossil fuels to begin with. So anyone that thinks that the powers that be are off hunting for alternative energy sources to get us off of fossil fuels has another thing coming. And by the way, fossil fuels don't come from fossils. Okay, so the human race is capable, I believe, of wonderful, beautiful, unbelievable, amazing things. Unfortunately, we are under a system of complete deception, where a very small group of people hold control over all wealth and power, and will do anything to maintain the status quo, and thusly maintain their monopoly over all wealth and power. Whoever they are, they're certainly buttholes, but let's keep in mind, I believe they're afraid, and like a cornered animal, they will lash out viciously and haphazardly when they feel threatened and cornered. They want more than anything for people to go back to sleep and take the blue pill and continue their utter control of our society as a whole, which is, for all intents and purposes, their infinite cash cow. And by the way, I patent that as a name for the newest indie band, Infinite Cash Cow. Just so you know, guys, I have some the JEKYLL merchandise available on the Teespring store. You should see below this player window on YouTube some of the JEKYLL merchandise. So take a look at that. And if you have any ideas for merchandise or designs that you'd like to see on t-shirts or on a, like a hoodie or whatever, get in touch with me, let me know, and I'll try to implement that into the store. So definitely check that out, and hopefully you find something that you like. Also, I've recently started uploading my older videos onto BitChute. My channel name there is also The Morgile. And once I get up to 1,000 subscribers on BitChute, I'm going to start putting exclusive premieres on BitChute and maybe eventually, ultimately, migrate away from YouTube. So we'll see how that goes. Cheers and God bless everybody. This has been The Morgile. If you enjoyed this and you want to help us keep making videos, consider becoming a channel supporter through PayPal or Patreon or Cash App or Venmo, or I'll put links in the description. But thanks so much to everybody for watching. Love you guys. God bless. And as always, spread the word, spread the world. Peace out, everybody.